Hi everyone, welcome to our very last workshop or our very last session of the workshop. Thank you for joining us for the past 2 weeks. So we're gonna probably reintroduce everyone because we have a few people here who weren't here last time. So I'll go first. I'm Angela. I'm the current editor-in-chief of the Daily Free Press, and I used to be the city editor.
I'm Sarah. I'm the current managing editor and the former features editor.
I'm Amber. I'm the current blog editor and a former writer on the blog.
I'm Alex. I am the current web chair on board and a former campus news editor.
Hi, I'm Sam. I am the current advertising and fundraising chair on the board, and I was a former features editor.
I'm Victoria. I'm the vice chair on the board right now and a former editor-in-chief.
I'm Colby. I'm the current opinion editor.
And I'm Sean. I'm a former editor-in-chief, and now I'm on the board of directors.
So we're gonna start. I'm gonna screen share. Okay. Sorry. There we go. Can you guys all see my screen? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so this is our last day, and so the topics we're going to go over are importance of local news or college news, internships, your rights as a journalist, how to respond to criticism, and the importance of diversity in the newsroom. So our internships section we're actually going to do last, just because three of our speakers aren't able to make it at that time. So yeah, we're going to get started. All right. So local and college news. Okay. So firstly, what do people think of when they refer to the media? So most of the time when people refer to the media, like the media isn't covering this or whatever, they refer to cable news. And so a lot of people, like for example, if people find out that you want to be a reporter, the first thing that they likely will ask you is, oh, so you want to be on TV. So there's this common perception that news media is like TV news, which that is one type of news media, but in reality, there's so much more. Like cable news honestly has become more entertainment than true journalism, just because you have to have interesting visuals a lot of the time to broadcast, but also big cable networks usually don't distinguish news from commentary very well. So when people treat this as like the sole source of news that they know and that they consume, that really just eliminates a huge chunk of what's out there to really inform yourself. Yeah. And so a lot of, so let's go on to local reporting. So local reporters basically cover the most issues that directly affect people in their community. And so that's something that really large media outlets just aren't able to do, because local journalists know know best what is actually happening in their communities. And that's why they're able to cover it best, because they are integrated in that community. They are part of that community in a way that national outlets are not. So a lot of national stories actually stem from local reporting. It's just a lot of the times they don't necessarily credit the local outlet that broke the news first, but the reality is that national outlets, even though they have more resources, they can't always be on the ground everywhere at all times. So they'll send out their people or their resources after a local reporter breaks the news. So national news really does rely on local news a lot of the time. So local news is kind of like the foundation of like if smaller newspapers cease to exist, then national outlets can't do their coverage as well anymore either, because we all sort of rely on each other. So without the coverage that local media offers, people will just be, less active participants in their communities, because no one is going to be telling them what's going on. And a lot of these issues that local media covers are things that take a lot of time to actually figure out. Like, you have to attend, city council meetings, or, peruse city budgets. A lot of these things normal residents aren't going to be taking the time to do, and that's where local reporters are really, really important. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Okay.
Yeah, I could jump in on that. Something else to keep in mind that local reporters have the ability to do that national media outlets just don't have the time to cultivate is a network of sources. So local reporters really benefit from creating sustainable relationships with their local government representatives, with people who might be able to give them tips. The longer a local reporter is in a role, the easier stories will come to them because the community knows them, and they know if they want something looked into, how to make that happen. So local reporters really benefit from that network that they create, from knowing a small community of people and being able to serve that small community of people. And that also means that they have a great amount of accountability, because if they don't serve that community of people well, the community will let them know. So they're a really reliable source. And while national media outlets are great and cover a lot of things that local reporters don't have the ability to, they're really on the ground creating connections and covering things that they otherwise wouldn't be able to. So that network is really important to local journalism.
Yeah, that's definitely a really good point. Yeah, so a lot of people also take to social media to get their news, which social media is really, really a good source of what's going on. But at the same time, there are problems that come with solely relying on social media to get your information. Like, for example, if your community Facebook group has a bunch of posts where people, express what's going on and their thoughts on what's going on, like, that's really useful, but they really don't tell you everything that you need to know, because Facebook isn't a public service. But your local news outlet, they have those ethical guidelines, and they fact check everything that they publish, and their sole job is to bring you the truth in context. And so a lot of social media, like, yeah, there are a lot of rumors that pop up on there, and things that, like, people can take videos to post on Twitter, things like that. They are very useful, but a lot of that is really unverified, and so relying on that solely, you're never truly gonna know what is going on. And also, people on social media aren't being paid to do that work. So even in terms of, like, incentive, there's no real incentive to give you full, truthful information that's fact-based and objective. Right. So yeah, does anyone have anything to add about social media? Okay. Yeah, so saving local journalism, it's a phrase that's kind of that you've been hearing a lot probably. And so let's talk about what that means. So it's not just about trying to get people to buy more physical newspapers. It's also about equipping your local newsroom with the funding and the staff and the resources to produce comprehensive local coverage. And so it's kind of wrong to look at just like a paper's declining print circulation and just think, oh, we're going to cut our staff because we can't sell as many ads. Because by cutting your staff, you're cutting your ability to really produce that important coverage. And so you're making the paper itself less valuable to its readers. And that in turn is a self-perpetuating cycle, because people are going to unsubscribe because you're just not producing the journalism that you were before. So it's really hard to get out of that cycle for local journalism. So one way to really kind of deal with that is to recognize that a big part of local journalism's decline over the past few years is the industry's inability to really adapt to what customers prefer. So as news becomes more digitized, local papers, college papers included, really need to invest in their digital presence. People want to see a clean and concise website where they can get their news from. People like getting their news from apps. So it's really smart to invest in what best serves your consumers as far as how they get their news. So yeah, and let's talk about paywalls. So a lot of local news outlets also have paywalls. Like we know that bigger legacy outlets also do, but a lot of people tend to be, either annoyed or even angry that they have to pay to read an article. And I think that's a really entitled mindset because these reporters don't dedicate their careers to informing the public because it gets them the money, because it doesn't really make them good money anyways. They're not doing it for the profit. They're doing it because they believe in the importance of their job. And it's really grueling work. So it really doesn't deserve to be done for free. Good journalism is worth paying for. It's worth sustaining. And the information doesn't come from nowhere. So that's why local news outlets, as well as trustworthy national outlets, all have those paywalls, and they're worth paying for a reason. Yeah, so lastly, I really want to emphasize the importance of college news too, because especially now when all the schools are, in this unprecedented moment of either reopening or just like completely adapting to remote, college newspapers are pretty much the sole source of initial campus news. Like everything, all the details that like the school administrations aren't sharing, that's what campus news outlets are on top of. And everything that national reporters know about what colleges are doing, a lot of that really stems from college student reporting. So that's just one big example of why college journalism is vital. Like obviously you're the only source of news that primarily serves that specific campus. So that's already very valuable to that campus. But that's just an example of why college newspapers are valuable to national coverage even. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say. Does anyone want to add on to that?
Yeah, could I add on quick? Could I just also circle back really quick to, we were talking about like local news before. I just wanted to add something, and it's that like, it's very rare today to find local outlets that are independently owned or that are owned by themselves or by the community. The majority of local newspapers are owned by large chains and large companies. You've probably heard of like Gannett, which owns USA Today. Maybe you've heard of Tribune Publishing, which owns Chicago Tribune and a bunch of papers. McClatchy owns a bunch of papers, the Miami Herald, the Sacramento Bee, some other ones. So this kind of corporate ownership has in many ways reduced the size of newsrooms, right? And another phenomenon that's kind of recent and that kind of is tied to the pandemic too is the actual like closure of newsroom buildings. So that's been happening for a long time, but actually in the last week or so, there's been, I'm forgetting which company it was, but they decided to shut down like a bunch of the newsrooms that their outlets were operating out of. And that's a really big problem, right? Because if journalists can't be in the communities they're covering, right? If their office isn't there, it makes it that much harder for them to get to stuff, to get to breaking news, but also just like have like a physical presence, to have a building with a name on it that people can see and they can trust. So there's like a lot of issues facing local news because of that. And it's at this point, like it's kind of inevitable. Like the chances are that like your local outlet is owned by some bigger company. Not even just those three I mentioned, but like tons of other ones. And again, like they're not necessarily driven by pursuit of good journalism, right? They're driven by like a pursuit of profit, right? And journalism, especially local journalism, is like not a very profitable business. Like it's just not, right? And that's why Angela was talking about ways that we can think about making it more profitable, and that's by making it more attractive to readers by reaching them in places that they are, right? So like she mentioned too, like print subscriptions declining, like that's pretty inevitable, right? That like newspapers are not going to be printed as much. People don't read physical papers anymore. But that doesn't mean that a paper is doing poorly, right? Because if they're investing in their digital presence and using social media, even putting out like e-editions online. I think the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette does like pretty much all of their weekly issues online now, except for like one a week. And that's like a really big like city daily paper. So there's this transition that's definitely happening. It's going to keep happening. But we have to be vigilant about it and not let it make the coverage that they're putting out less valuable. Yeah. And also I would echo everything she said about college news. It's so important. There's a difference between, and you might already know this, but between like actually independent and like editorially independent. So some college newspapers will say they're editorially independent, but they'll still be supported financially by the university, by the institution. Others, like the one that we're part of here, are both. So we're editorially and financially independent, which has costs and benefits, right? Sometimes financial independence can be hard, and we've experienced that for sure here. But I think that the benefits way outweigh that, and that there's no strings attached to the administration, and you're really on your own, which is a lot of responsibility to have when you're 18 to 21 years old, right? Like we all are, but it's really fun, and it feels good, I think, and I'm sure you guys could all second this, to do reporting that's totally separate and that has no, the administration has no bearing over. So, sorry, I talked a long time. That's it.
I was wondering if I could also add something onto this conversation. I was thinking about what Angela said. When people talk about the media, you see that a lot lately where it's like, oh, why isn't the media covering this? By which they mean, why isn't CNN or Fox News covering this? Usually when cable news only has a certain amount of hours in the day that they can budget stories for, when normally the videos or stories that are surfacing around the internet were produced by local journalists. So on that note, I would like to say, please follow local journalists on every type of social media that you have, and really promote like their Twitters and their Facebooks, because social media can be like a route for misinformation, but it also could be a really incredible route like for correct information, especially when it's coming from the correct source that originally reported on it. So if you in your own social media feel like it's appropriate for you to present yourself as a reporter, you know, if you work at the Freep or someplace similar, you are a real reporter. College news is real news, and it's very important. So you can present your social media like any other reporter would, and then encourage people at your college, or if you eventually go into local news in your community, to follow you and find their news directly on social media, and then promote it from there, because the media is covering it, and social media can be good if used correctly. So just really promote those resources that are available, but sometimes underutilized.
Yeah, definitely. And that's not to say that we're writing off national media, because a lot of the times the stuff that local journalists are reporting on, national media outlets are also reporting on. It's just that they can't cover every single city. So just because they're not covering your city doesn't mean that they're not covering the issue that you're saying that they're not covering. So yeah, just to emphasize that. There are 2 questions in the Q&A box. For some reason, I still can't see them. Does anyone want to read them?
Yeah, so I mean, the first one we already covered a lot. We always get college news from school events. Is that a good example? Yeah, I think hopefully everything we just talked about answered that. But yeah, college journalism can, you know, be from both more like topics happening on campus, but also from your events. But if anyone wants to expand on that, you can.
Sorry, what's the question?
It just says we get our college news from school events. Is that a good example? So I'm not sure what exactly it's asking for, a good example of what, but I think we did cover it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I guess like college journalism is a big mix, right, of covering like student life and and like really like digging deep into like administrative policies too, right? So, and people want to read both those things. They want to read about how the hockey team is doing, and they also would want to know if the administration is falling short at hiring more diverse faculty or hitting certain numbers that they've wanted to hit, right? So, I mean, there's definitely like a big gamut of things. And what's cool is that when you go to a school that's big like BU with so many students doing all these things, like there's always stuff that's going on, right? There's always people raising money for something or clubs doing cool things. So I don't know, it's a nice, like really cool environment to get to do reporting. And also too, if you're in a city like we are in Boston, it's even better, right? Because there's just so much stuff, and you can, what's nice with like our city news desk is that people can go out and like cover city hall meetings and like city council stuff, and you really get like local government experience too. Not that we're the only or even the preeminent source for like Boston government news, right? But you're still getting that experience and sitting next to Globe reporters and Herald reporters, which is pretty cool.
There's a really big advantage of being in the city where you're competing with other news outlets because you get that experience. But if your school is in a city where, you know, it's kind of isolated and there really aren't other news outlets, then you can also act as basically the main source of news for that college town that you're in. So no matter where you are, there's going to be something that makes it advantageous for you to also cover the city as well.
And as far as events coverage goes, events coverage is really important, but I would definitely encourage you to try to come up with an interesting angle for any events that you're covering at your college. So not just like this happened and this person said this and this is how much money they raised or whatever, but any angles you can come up with for event stories, definitely push to cover that also.
And then the second question is asking how we balance school and free and other clubs. How much time does it take up per week? So I think we might all have similar, but maybe also different opinions on this. But I think overall, the fact that we're able to do it, we do spend a lot of time out of our week in the office every week. And I think that that just shows our commitment to the values of journalism and that we really value, you know, what we're doing, and the fact that we're able to do it shows that.
Yeah, and I think the time commitment completely depends on if you're a writer or a photographer or an editor or an associate editor or a board member. Like they're completely different jobs, all of them, and like obviously the editor-in-chief has the biggest time commitment, and it's a big one, and that comes from being financially and editorially independent. You know, people are surprised when they find out we don't have a faculty advisor or anything like that. Like it really is us doing every single step of this. So yeah, some of us have committed ourselves to a lot more time per week to make that happen, but you know, writers, we just kind of ask for usually a story a week, photographers, you know, a few shoots per month and things like that. It's what you make of it, but then we're also happy to have writers that want to cover a lot of things and want to become editors and put in the time, which is a little more time to be more involved. So it's what you make of it. In general, you know, it's hard to be a full-time editor, I think, and have like a big position in another club, but that doesn't mean you have to drop out of every club you're in just because you're with the newspaper. And we wouldn't want you to do that either.
I think with kind of the same as any other organization, you kind of get out of it what you put into it. So the more time you do dedicate to the group, the more you get out of it. And of course, there's like this problem of some people really aren't able to commit as much time as they would like to, just because they do have to, you know, work to otherwise support themselves or things like that. And so that's also a problem that you face with unpaid extracurriculars. And that's just like a complicated situation to navigate, but it's something that college newspapers and newsrooms in general should keep in mind. Okay, so I think we can move on to the next slide, which is about your rights as a journalist.
Yeah, so Alex and I did this part. Do you want to talk a little bit about the First Amendment and journalists, the fun fact about the Constitution, Alex?
Sure. So, as you all know, the First Amendment of the Constitution includes freedom of the press, which the fun fact about that is it makes journalism the only profession that is protected by the Constitution. Because it is, in a way, the fourth branch of government. It is just as essential to democracy as our elected positions.
Yeah, it's just interesting that it's the only job mentioned in the Constitution that wasn't basically created by the Constitution. And it just goes to show, because it's in the First Amendment, how important journalism is, which ties into what we were just talking about. In terms of your rights as a journalist, we're going to talk about a lot of different things because there's a lot of things that are encompassed within this. Your personal rights and then also your rights while reporting and things like that. So as far as like the reporting process, the Freedom of Information Act really is what journalists like to live by in terms of like public records and having access to government operations and agendas and things like that. So actually a fun fact that we found out today is that the Freedom of Information Act is used by a lot of professions and mostly not journalists actually, but it's there for journalists to use and find documents and other things that they need to know that the public usually, it's usually in a place that's hard to get. So when you go to like a county clerk's office or wherever you're going to request information, you know, the police department, things like that, you have this behind you to say it's my right, you know, as a not even as a journalist, but just as a citizen, to be able to access this. It is somewhat different in some states. For example, in Virginia, only citizens of Virginia have this right. So that's an interesting thing, that if you're a reporter in a state where you're not a citizen, you might not have the same rights to the information, which is something to keep in mind. And I think for a lot of the things we're talking about today, it depends a lot on the state where you're reporting and less so the country.
Yeah. And in terms of collecting information in other ways besides public records requests, journalists generally have the same rights as the general public to access public property and report from it. And generally, it is legal to record video of people where they would reasonably expect to be seen. And it's legal to record like interviews where your recording device is in plain sight. And in terms of interviews in other ways, like over the phone and such, you generally, I don't think this is a law, but general practice is you should identify yourself as a journalist and state like the story that you're working on and why you're contacting that person. And then this varies by state, but in Massachusetts, it's a two-party recording state, I think is how you say it, which basically means that you're required by law to get explicit permission from them to record a phone conversation if you're interviewing them and want to be able to go back to the recording. And if they don't give you permission, then you can't record them. But that's not true in some states. I believe in New York, you don't even have to tell them that you're recording, even though you should, as just a common courtesy.
Yeah, so in terms of sort of photographing and videoing people that should expect to be seen in a public space, this is something that comes up a lot with protests and has kind of been a topic of discussion a lot. people saying, you know, should we be publishing pictures of protesters and things like that? And while we're not going to comment on like the ethics of that necessarily, it is definitely within any publication's right to publish photos of a protester. In terms of like privacy laws, if they're protesting, they should be expected to be seen in public. You know, if they're wearing masks and other coverings, then obviously that's all we have a photo of. But this has happened like even in student government meetings and things like that, where people don't want their photo to be taken, but since those things are open to the public and anyone could have gone to them, you're more than it's within your rights to publish that, and usually it's not a problem. But if you have to, you can go back to those guidelines to tell people, you know, unfortunately you were in a public space and therefore we're not able to take this down. That also kind of goes into talking about protests and things, and goes into interactions with the police. A lot of the literature and discussion around journalists' interactions with with police is during protests. And I know recently that's definitely been in the news a lot more. So basically it kind of goes both ways between journalists and police. They can't arrest you for reporting something. If you're at a protest and reporting, it's considered interfering with the reporting process and interfering with the public's right to information to arrest a journalist while they're reporting. That being said, every pretty much guideline for journalists from any newspaper or association will tell you you shouldn't fight with the police. If a police officer is trying to arrest you, you don't have to, but you should probably stay calm and just say, you know, you don't want to speak until someone else is present. Usually you can call your editor. That would be the first person to know that you got arrested while protesting, because if you're at like a more not like a college newspaper necessarily, but like if a reporter for the Times was arrested, they're going to tell the Times, and then the Times is going to get someone to get them out of jail. I personally believe the Freep would do anything possible to get a reporter out of jail if that happened. But basically, police should not be arresting you. You're never actually going to get in legal trouble for reporting. But unfortunately, as we've seen lately, sometimes police do arrest journalists while on the job. And just know, if that were to unfortunately happen to you, that yes, you might spend a night in jail, but you're not actually going to be in any sort of trouble. I don't know how to explain this. That doesn't sound great, but and then what I mean by it going both ways is that we as journalists have no right to interfere with their work as police. So don't walk up to someone that's being actively arrested, asking them for comment or asking the police officer for comment and things like that. There should be a sort of mutual respect between journalists and police officers in terms of there's no reason for your jobs to interfere with one another.
Yeah. So yeah, basically it's like kind of a cold comfort, but like say a lot of you probably saw back in Minneapolis when the CNN anchor was arrested live on air, like he just had to go with it and get arrested. But like the cold comfort is that like the police were totally in the wrong there because he was complying with their orders, and he was soon released. But okay, moving on to shield laws. Yeah. So a shield law is a law that protects witnesses from revealing certain information in court, and it also applies to, it basically protects a journalist from being forced to reveal a confidential source to law enforcement or to a court or a jury. So it depends on the state that you're in. If you have this kind of protection. So for example, Massachusetts does not have a shield law, which means that if a court orders a journalist to reveal a confidential source and that journalist refuses to, that journalist could be sent to jail. But other states have like a complete protection for that, where like the journalist has a total right under the First Amendment to keep that source confidential, and other states it kind of depends on a case by case basis.
Yeah, it gets much more tricky if you actually end up in court testifying for something. Like usually that you wouldn't be some sort of defendant in that case. It's just, you know, as a witness and someone that knows information about whatever is going on. In Massachusetts, like he said, you're going to have to tell them. In other places, you'd be able to say, I'm not going to reveal that information. But in the case that it doesn't actually go to a court case, in most states, including Massachusetts, like a law enforcement, a police officer, they can't just like get a warrant for your sources. Like there's no, if a police officer says, tell me who told you that, you don't have any responsibility to tell them that. In fact, it's like within your rights to not tell them that and to refuse to tell them that. But then if that information were to be subpoenaed by a court, which is a little different from like testifying in court, it does depend on the state whether they can confiscate the information. Most of this is just in terms of like if a source emails you or forwards you an email that you can't publish the actual text of, but you can paraphrase and things like that, or they want to remain anonymous. Those things are those things are stripped away from you once you're in a courtroom in some states. So this is also something to keep in mind if a source is asking you for anonymity, I don't know how to say that, then you can be transparent with them that if for some reason it were to ever go to court, that is the case when you would be required to break that trust between the two of you for them to stay anonymous. But in almost all other situations, you have no responsibility or expectation to reveal a source if they're uncomfortable with it. And also you actually should never reveal a source if they're uncomfortable with it, unless you're in one of these situations where it's required. But yeah, like we said, it just kind of depends a lot on what state you're in. That being said, we wanted to get a little more into like your personal privacy and things that you would have to disclose.
Shield laws.
What?
Sorry?
Can I add something about shield laws?
Yeah.
Sure.
I just want to emphasize the importance of them because basically the reason that they exist is, first of all, it lets you build trust between your sources and, you know, the journalist, because the journalists can't do their job if no one can trust, if people who are at risk, if they're being found out of leaking information, if they're not able to trust journalists, then journalists can't do their job, and that kind of information would never be revealed. So to have a shield law makes it possible to really hold institutions and governments accountable, because there's no fear of you breaking that trust. But even in states without shield laws, you really don't have to reveal your source. You'll just have to take the jail time, which is an inconvenience, but it's like not like I'm not saying like you should choose, like I'm not telling anyone what they should do, but just basically there are journalists who have been known to basically choose jail time over revealing their source, and it's really like a personal ethical decision.
Yeah, but that being said, like it should be rare that you're gonna even have to use a confidential source, and if it's not something that is like putting the source at personal risk, you should try to have their name on the record, because it's going to make your story more credible. But when you do have to have a confidential source, these are the things that can guide you through that process.
Yeah, and I would also just add on to Angela's thing, like, that's definitely a matter of personal conviction. Like, you should never think that, oh, my editor would expect me to go to jail instead of revealing this source. But there's definitely a lot to be said for doing that and keeping, especially it probably depends on the story and the situation. Journalists often know the most, especially in those kind of situations. So maybe it is, if you choose to go to jail instead of revealing a source, then that is a personal choice. That being said, also when you're interviewing someone at a source and they were to ask you, you know, well, what do you think about this, or what do you have to say? Are you, I don't know. I'm thinking of examples like, have you tested for COVID? Have you ever been tested positive? You know, do you know anyone in your family who's had COVID? Like, when they ask questions back to you, you don't need to and probably shouldn't give your personal opinions on any topic, but also in terms of just disclosing personal information. When you're reporting, you are on the job. So all you need to tell a person, and you should be telling a person really, is, you know, your name, just so that they can find the work afterward, or reach out to you afterwards. So some sort of contact information, hopefully that's related to the school you're reporting on, or the newspaper you're working for. And then yeah, the publication that you're working for and where the story will be if they're published is important. But you don't ever have to say like, oh, here's my personal cell phone number, or not that this happens much. And I think really what we wanted to emphasize with privacy is like privacy to your opinions and things like that. Like, if you want to engage with a source and kind of, you know, push back and say, well, this is my personal experience, then you can do that, but you have no obligation to give them any more information than your name, who you're reporting for, and where you'll be, if they're making you uncomfortable in any way. Also, I would say, if a source is making you uncomfortable in any way, then it's probably best to not use them as a source if possible, unless it's like they're essential to your story. But also never be scared to ask your editor for someone else to be taking a story if a source has crossed lines with you. That's always within your right. Yeah, and in terms of personal opinions, I don't know, Alex, if you want to talk about being a citizen while being a journalist.
Sure. Yeah, it's definitely a complicated thing, and kind of goes into our next bullet of political activism as well, because like obviously every journalist is also a citizen, and they have their opinions, personal and political, and so you can like, it's kind of unavoidable to have your worldview kind of affect your reporting, because that's just how it works. But you don't want it to get in the way of your reporting. You don't want it to affect your sources, if that makes sense. Sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here.
Yeah, in terms of like being publicly or like really outwardly, which usually comes up in social media, political, I guess, while you're a journalist, a lot of times it's going to depend on who you're working for. So, for example, the New York Times pretty famously put out a policy a few years ago telling asking their journalists to self-censor in terms of explicit support for any candidate or political party, just because they emphasized, the exact quote is, if our journalists are perceived as biased or if they engage in editorializing on social media, that can undercut the credibility of the entire newsroom. So this is something that a lot of newsrooms are debating and have a lot of different policies. It really depends where you are, if what they're going to require of you. And I guess that is one thing that is totally within their ability to do. Because if you think about any other workplace, there are lots of workplaces that require you to be very private about your politics and things like that. So it's just kind of like any other workplace. And while some places and some newsrooms may allow you to be actively political on your social medias, that still should never be a part of your reporting, and it should never be something that's affecting your reporting. Being aware of where your biases might inhibit good reporting is really important. And then also kind of going off of what Alex said about journalism being the fourth branch of government earlier, journalism itself is a form of activism, providing truth to the public that is actively contributing to democracy, and that commitment is really important and really something that you should be proud of, even if your newspaper or your editor is asking you not to tweet that, you know, Biden 2020 or things like that. You're doing good work by finding the bottom of stories, even if they're not political, even if they're just human interest stories. You're informing the public on things that they wouldn't have known if you weren't doing this work. And that is part of democracy, it's a very political job in good and bad ways, I think. But it really just depends on your newsroom, whether you're gonna be able to be vocal about it. That becomes unfortunate in some situations where you feel like your identity, your personal identity is being attacked and you can't defend yourself publicly. It's definitely a personal choice, and a lot of people have chosen not to work for certain places because of these rules. So it's something that's constantly changing in journalism, I think.
Yeah. And no matter where you work, you still have the right to participate in like private political acts. Like, it's never gonna affect your reporting if you go out and vote in every election. There's a difference between voting versus like publicly advocating who you're voting for. And just because we are journalists doesn't mean we can't exercise our right to vote or our right to privately protest or anything else that is in that vein where you're not associating yourself with the name of your publication or your reporting.
Yeah, it looks like there's a question actually about can journalists vote in presidential elections, and it says, I know one friend whose student newsroom asked them not to be a member of a political party since that information is public. Is that excessive? It's, in terms of voting, yes, you can, and I personally think should vote. Yeah, voting. I mean, we live in the society. Like you can be a participant of a country while also reporting on it. You like it's illegal for anyone to ask you not to register to vote to have a job. If that ever happens, then like don't take that job and like report them. You can and should vote. In terms of political party affiliations being public, yeah, so in terms of showing that you're a Democrat or Republican, I think that I'd have to see like some court decisions on this, but in some states where they have closed primaries, you can only vote in a primary if you're registered to one of those parties. So I'd be interested to see what courts have to say about whether that's infringing on your right to vote, because that's quite literally stopping you from voting in certain elections.
Yeah, and I would say this is slightly me editorializing a little bit, but I think, you know, a newsroom saying that you can't even register for a political party is kind of being dishonest about the fact that like reporters are full humans with their own personal opinions, and just because we have opinions doesn't mean we're not doing important, objective, truthful journalism.
True
Um,
objectivity doesn't mean like hiding the fact that you have biases, because everyone does. It's about being transparent and acknowledging what your biases are, but not letting that affect your work. There's a difference. Like what Alex said about it being dishonest, that's very important, because it is, I think, honestly less objective to try to hide what party you're affiliated with. It doesn't help you do better reporting.
yeah. Woodward
Yeah,
and
and
Bernstein were famously, one of them was a registered Democrat, one of them was a registered Republican, and they were still able to do very important journalism that brought down a president.
Okay, so let's go through the other questions that we have.
In terms of how long you could be held in jail if you refuse to name a source and things like that, I don't know exactly. We'd have to research. It probably depends on the state or the county or something, like how much bail they can post for a person that commits that, or how long they can keep you. We didn't mean to scare you or make you think that you're going to spend nights in jail if you're covering protests, because those are very, very uncommon experiences that unfortunately maybe have been more common this summer. But you're completely protected, and we're just trying to explain that if that were to happen, it's going to be traumatizing and you're not going to like it if you were to spend the night in jail, I assume. Maybe some people do, but like you won't actually end up like in prison with a sentence. Like you can't be convicted of anything because you didn't do anything wrong. If you resist the police and were to do something that were considered resisting them or resisting their arrest, even if you know that the arrest is unlawful, that becomes a gray area, which is why we suggest if you're ever in that situation to cooperate, just because not cooperating could legitimize their arrest. And then it says, when you're covering a protest, should you also interview people in the police department for their thoughts or commentary on the event? I don't think it's typical practice to interview the police every time there's a protest. I think if the police interacted in a way that the public is responding to, then it's important to get their comment. You know, if like lately a big topic has been police brutality during protests. So I think if that is the story you're writing, then yes, the police should be in it. But any general protests, you know, if police are just kind of standing around because they have to and it's their job to during a protest, then it's not necessarily required to get their comment just because they're there.
Yeah.
I would say though, with that, like, it is also sometimes helpful to ask police, like, oh, do you expect, how many people do you expect if you're kind of early on? Sometimes they do kind of get tipped off on things in advance. Or like, oh, do you think it's gonna get, like, how do they think it's gonna turn out? Because honestly, like, maybe not in times like now, but I know in past, like, they can be helpful, and also that way you kind of identify yourself as a journalist to them early on, but it's not necessary all the time.
Yeah, I'd also say that just remember when you're covering a protest that like the reason you're there is to give the public the information that they should know about what's going on. So it's possible that interviewing the police will help give the public a more fuller understanding of the situation, especially if the police have had to or chose to intervene in a protest. But it shouldn't be something where you feel obligated to get both sides of the story. Let's talk to the protesters, let's talk to the police, and devote equal parts of the story to it. Your job is to provide a full story for your readership, and that might include some context from police.
This does bring up an interesting sort of case study, though. This past year, the Harvard Crimson came under some fire for reaching out to ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, for comment. on a protest because it was speculated that they had kind of tipped ICE off about the protest. And in that situation, people were frustrated that maybe people were exposed as undocumented when they wouldn't have been before. It did turn out that they had simply reached out for comment during and after the protest and had not actually, given them any information that they wouldn't have had before. But it can be sensitive to reach out to both sides in these situations. But like Alex said, and like I don't think unless the police are part of the story really that you need to emphasize their opinions on the protests. And then the other question is, how do you know whether you need to get permission to film in an area? Do you need permission when you are filming at BU?
On most private properties, if you're going to use your footage for commercial use or anything, yeah, you would need permission. I mean, BU students, I don't think would, because they're students here. Same thing as I think, like at other schools, if students of that school are filming there, they don't need to get extra permission. But because private schools are private property, for example, and just like anywhere that's not a public sidewalk or a public space, there's probably some sort of, it really depends on the venue itself. There's no like universal law for it. It's just if you plan to film somewhere that is a private space, like even airports, sometimes you need to get permission. So just do a quick Google search, go to that website of that place, and you'll probably be able to figure it out, or just call them and ask.
Yeah, in terms of BU, I'm sure there's like, specific circumstances that you just have to be mindful of. But in my personal experience, I have never asked nor been nor needed to ask for permission to record anywhere. I've gone to plenty of events from BU held by administration or clubs or like student government, and I've gotten student quotes from like the streets at BU or inside the George Sherman Union, and like no one's ever come up to me and be like, hey, you're not supposed to record here, or let us know first, or anything like that. So like for BU students, that's not something that I've run into before.
Actually, now that you said that, I do know that at least in the Kenmore Starbucks, if someone takes out a camera, they'll ask someone to put it away. It wasn't a reporter that I saw that happen to. Like, I think it was someone just trying to like do a photography project or something, but they pulled a camera out and like the employees it seemed like it had happened before and they'd asked them to put it away before. So it's just like similar. If you're in a business or something, you should definitely get their permission, even though that was a BU Starbucks, and like probably in the Questrom Starbucks, they wouldn't have noticed or cared. I don't know, but yeah, just like Angela said, it's worth your time to make sure.
Is that it for the questions?
Can I also just add like one quick more comment when we were talking about the question relating to if you should reach out to police in protests, which is just to remember to treat them as any other source, in that like if you learn any new information from them, don't immediately take that as objective fact. If you're going to use information from police, treat them as any other source and make sure that that information is verified.
All right, so we're going to move on to how to respond to criticism. So that would be Sean and Haley.
So I guess when it comes to criticism, the first thing really is that in journalism, transparency is a must. And So the big thing is I would say the process of when you get critiqued in some way, whether it's a source emailing you and saying, oh, this is wrong, or just someone even sending a hate comment, the first thing to think is like, are they right? Like, is there something that actually needs to be corrected with my article? And if it's the case, like you actually made an error or kind of like misrepresented something in a way that's not right, it's immediately the thing to do is talk to your editor and ask them. Never go and correct an article, like a big thing about an article on your own. Talk to your editor, say what they think, but making corrections, if it's a correction that, it's one thing if it's just like a spelling of a name that's been, you just change really quickly, but if it's a correction that changes the accuracy of the article, you always want to put a correction notice in your article, and that's something your editor might do themselves or they might tell you to do, but putting corrections in your articles are really important. It's about accountability. Someone could have read the article beforehand and got a totally different idea if you had something wrong, and if they were to check back, they should know why the article's changed. So that's like the first part of criticism, that when you're actually being critiqued for a good reason and you have to change it. I don't know if you want to add anything else on that, Sean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I would echo all of that. I think what you said too about just like making sure your editor knows everything is really important. It's kind of nice when you're a reporter that like, if someone's really bringing up like a criticism of your article, that you can kind of just direct them to your editor and say, look, like you're welcome to reach out to my editor, and then your editor might decide that they want to take some other step, either by having you reach back out, or maybe they would even reach out themselves just based on what the situation was. But yeah, I would definitely never undercut any of like the newsroom hierarchy, even if it's something small. I would always check before going in and editing an article. If you think about journalism, right, as like a record of history, right, we want that record to be as accurate and transparent as possible. So publishing those corrections is just a part of that process. And I mean, it sucks, but like it does happen. I mean, it happens a lot, and like you're not necessarily bad at your job because you spelled someone's name wrong or something. Obviously, if there's bigger corrections, and that could speak to other issues maybe, but generally, like if you're thorough and you're careful with what you're doing and your article's being edited usually by multiple people before it gets published, you're going to be okay. But like corrections are common, like they do happen. The Free publishes them, New York Times publishes them all the time, right? They happen, especially also with like, I might be going into the next section, but like the 24-hour news cycle we live in, right? Like the fact is like articles that get up faster do better, right? And make more money and ad revenue. So sometimes, and you can probably see this in media outlets, like occasionally it does seem like more and more like a full story might not go up, right? It'll just be snippets of information. It'll be breaking news. And New York Times, a lot of times their first story on something will be like 3 paragraphs, right? Online, and then they'll update it with more and more stuff. So sometimes editors might just be like, I want you to get this up as quickly as you can. And if there's issues with it, you'll have to go back and address it. And obviously that doesn't happen all the time, but it's more and more common, I guess, because it's the way to get web traffic.
Yeah, and so I guess kind of the next part would be when you get criticism that isn't valid, or, I mean, it could be valid from that person, but it isn't something wrong with your article. My biggest tip is typically to avoid it. If someone tweets at you angry about your article, ignore it. You don't have to fight with everyone. If someone has a question about your reporting, like, oh, why did you say this, something like that's actually more genuine, then maybe you'd respond to it on Twitter or something. But don't respond to hate. Don't respond to people accusing your article of being false or fake news. It's better not to engage with those people. I know it might feel really weird at first because you'll see the only reply to your tweet is a tweet calling your reporting stupid or something, and you hate that there's not a response from you there. But I'm telling you, like, if you don't ignore it in those cases, you're going to end up on a sticky situation where you might look bad. It may just make you look like you can't control yourself online. And you really should try your best to ignore criticism. Know that there are a lot of bots online. There are a lot of people that it's not about you, and you have to learn to kind of just accept the criticism if it's not a situation where you need to be corrected, and just don't engage. It's better if you don't most of the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And also, I mean, just keep in mind that like most people reading your article are going to read it and move on with their day and digest the information, right? They're not going to take the time to go in there and write some sort of hate comment, right? And also people are the most likely to leave a review of something, right, if they have a bad experience for whatever reason. And even if that's not justified, they're still likely to do it for that reason. So like, just know that people are still reading what you're writing and still getting the value out of the work that you've done. It's just that sometimes the only thing you'll see is hate comments, or not even just hate comments, but just people offering some kind of unnecessary opinion. And it's true in a lot of news like websites, right? The comment sections a lot of times are always just like trash, right? And it's even Facebook too, if you look at the Facebook comments sometimes. So it's not you, it's just kind of the way the internet is.
Yeah, I guess I just would really emphasize be careful on Twitter. It's weird to kind of transition from being someone like, I don't know if you're in high school, from having a Twitter where you kind of just freely post stupid things to like actually using it for journalism. And one of those things just means being professional. Tweet as if every one of your editors and bosses are going to see it. Tweet as if your parents are going to see it. Like, I would just try to tweet and note that people that are in charge of you or might consider you a job one day are going to see it, and they don't want to see you firing back at someone who who got all offensive in their tweets towards you. Like, just don't, I'd say. So I don't know if there's anything else to really touch on this, but if anyone has any questions.
Are we done with the slide?
Yeah.
I would just say too, like, I know it says accusations of bias, like, you're definitely going to get the experience of people saying that you have like liberal bias, right? That you like censor conservative viewpoints and all that. Like, that's common. I'm sure it's happened to everyone on this Zoom call at some point. It's happened to me many times in the reporting that I've done. And I mean, it's not true, right? You know that you're doing objective reporting. You know that you're talking to both sides. So, I mean, unless you're an opinion writer, which is fine, you can do reported opinion, and that's totally a valid like type of journalism. But for the objective reporting that you're doing, especially at the local level, right? Like, where you're not even writing about Trump or anything that's divisive in that sense, right? You're covering a city council meeting, you're covering, I don't know, a zoning board meeting, right? Like, people love to bring politics and do it. And also this goes back to like what we talked about a couple out like earlier in these sessions, but like the perception of the media people have a lot of times is that it's like politics, right? That like they watch CNN and MSNBC and Fox News, and it's like all the media talks about is Trump, and it's because all the TV media pretty much talks about is Trump, right? Like that's the story that they run with, and in many ways it's important that they do that, right? But also in some ways it's bad that it doesn't, other things don't get covered as much. But like for you as a reporter for a college outlet or for a local outlet, yeah, it's not as, that's not to say that like there aren't political issues at all levels. Sorry if that was unclear. But I'm talking, I guess I meant more like national politics, right? Like a lot of times your local elections are not partisan. Right? Maybe they are, I don't know.
And I would say on the opposite side of criticism also, just when it comes to Twitter, also don't engage with your positive reactions unless it's something just saying great reporting. If someone is, let's say your article's about a protest against police brutality and someone responds to your article like, great, I hate the police, or just something like great article, but I hate the, like, agreeing with the general theme of your article, but they have an opinion, I would also urge you not to engage with those. Even if they're expressing an opinion about about something in your article, it can be misconstrued if you reply to them or retweet them or like it. I would only engage on Twitter with comments that are neutral. Like if someone tells you your reporting's great, of course answer, but if they have partisan opinions in there, just try not to engage, because even if it's positive comments towards your work, you don't want to make it seem like there is an underlying bias that anyone could ever call out.
So just remember that there could be the same story and there will be people on both sides saying that you're favoring the opposite side. So you can never win. And so just really don't like take that to heart. Just, you're never going to be able to satisfy anyone, and it's not your job to satisfy everyone. Okay. So next we're going to talk about diversity in the newsroom. Okay, so firstly, let's talk about how credibility plays into that. So obviously credibility is made of trust, and so credibility is therefore built through experience and expertise. And so, for example, that's why basically only a doctor can give you a credible diagnosis of your disease. Same idea, like diverse people have different areas of experience and expertise that altogether will make up a newsroom where all different experiences can be truthfully represented. So if you have a newsroom full of old people, for example, then it's harder to credibly cover issues that relate more to young people. So if your entire staff has a mortgage, then what can they really know about, rental issues? And for example, if your entire staff is like non-Hispanic, what can you really know about experiences within that community? And so like lived experience over a lifetime in its own way is expertise, and people from different backgrounds have this kind of experience relating to their background. So by having a diverse staff, you therefore have a diverse array of expertise on the human experience. And so as for representation, by serving the public, you need to represent the public. And the best way to do that is to have a staff that's reflective of the public. So you can't really think that you can accurately represent a community if you haven't really experienced all sides to it. I mean, like, yeah, it's true that the job of a journalist is to jump into covering unfamiliar topics, but just like having a degree in a certain field gives you an advantage when you're covering that field, having been part of a certain community also gives you an advantage when covering that community, because you know what to look for and you know what the concerns are, and you also know what is maybe not being covered enough. So if you don't have that personal experience, it's just going to be a lot harder for you to accurately cover something that you just really haven't lived. And so, does anyone want to add on to that first of all?
Yeah, so I think that, we've been like talking about bias, and your own inherent biases that you have are a result of just your life and how you've lived it. So like your race, your gender, sexuality, all of those things and many more play into the inherent biases that you have. And even like objective reporting, sometimes that we've seen it, like I know publications have kind of like tripped up on the things that they've said, even in objective reporting, that has sounded racist or sexist in certain ways. So I think having a diverse newsroom helps with catching those things and like stopping it before it goes into print. If you had a newsroom that was like only white men, like, and they were reporting on things that maybe pertain more towards women or more towards a minority or something else like that, they might put things out or miss things in stories that, you would think they should know, but they might not, just because that's not, as Angela was saying, like their lived experience. So it's really important to have newsrooms that have all different types of people, so that way things can be caught that are like offensive maybe, or just like things that not everyone would know. So like my experience is a lot different from a man's experience or anything else like that. So it's just important to have people who are in the newsroom to hold each other accountable, and that'll just like overall help the credibility of publications.
Yeah, I also just want to add that like having a diverse newsroom and publishing diverse news stories builds a foundation of trust in your readers and your viewers if you're on TV. And I think it's just important, because if you only are representing one side, like one race, one political belief, then the trust is not there for all of your readers.
Yeah, so let's get into what actually is true diversity. So firstly, I like to emphasize that it's not just for looks. it's not about, you know, having a few token minorities in your newsroom, and it's really not about the superficial look of it. It not only makes you better able to serve the public, but as we explained previously, it enables you to enhance your own work. So more diversity of people pretty much equals more diversity of ideas and talents and skills. So if it's not enough to do it for your community, then it's worth it to do it for the betterment of your workplace. And just to reemphasize, yeah, it's really not about tokenization. Even if you have a few, you know, varied POC sprinkled into your otherwise majority white newsroom, for example, it's still really not diversity, because in a lot of places in America, that is nowhere near proportionate to the population you serve. And also, it's also not about making like diversity coverage its own thing. All coverage should already span a diverse group of people, like at all levels and all aspects of what you're reporting on. So basically all issues affect a diverse array of people. So instead of separating your normal coverage and coverage that zones in on a specific community's struggle with the same issue, just remember that diversity is not a unique section of its own. It's integrated into life itself. And so therefore it should always be infused into your regular coverage. Does anyone have anything to add, or are there any questions in the box? All right. So we can move on to talking about internships.
Yeah, so I guess to start, first off, if you're applying for any internships, the first thing you're going to see is that you need experience. That is why, obviously, we've been urging this entire time, join your campus publication. It's the first step. It's how you get published clips, and it's just so important. Do whatever you can to get published before you have an internship, because that's what they're going to be looking for. And yeah, I don't know if Joel or Cami, if you want to say anything else about, I guess, joining publications.
Yeah, I'd say, you know, entering college and being a journalism student, a lot of people have like a dream of writing for a big publication or doing really big journalism. But in journalism, it really more so than the school you go to, it really matters the experience you have. And that's what editors will be looking for when they're hiring interns and when they're hiring reporters, is what experience do they have? And it's like a ladder. You start small and then you work your way up. And the first rung on that ladder is your campus publication. Without clips under your belt, no editor will want to hire you because they have no proof of the work you can do. That's how I got my first internship at a local news organization, was because I had done a lot with the FREEP in my first year of college. And they were impressed with the amount of work I did, but also the diversity of the work I did. So that's why I think it's really, really important to be involved in the college publication. You know, whatever that looks like, whatever college you go to, it's really important to do that. Yeah, I don't know if Cami, you have anything to add, but.
Yeah, just adding on to that, college publications and even local organizations just offer more room for you to start your own project, or they give you more freedom to, I'd say, dive in and do a lot of different things, which is great for your portfolio. And so I just like stress, like Joel said, to get a lot of things that you can talk about that you started or that you did on your own, which is a lot easier at local or campus publications. Unfortunately, the journalism industry is known for unpaid internships, especially like when you first start out. It's a lot of, even if it's not unpaid, a lot of the times it does require you to relocate to expensive cities like New York or Boston, or places that have a high cost of living. And so navigating the unpaid internships, I think, is the number one key is to just be transparent with your manager. If you have to work another part-time job or do work study or something like that to make up for income that you need to be making, that's not something you should be embarrassed of. I know that news organizations now are increasing their diversity inclusion efforts, and so that's, you know, you should really pay attention to how your managers and that news organization includes people who may not be privileged enough to take on an unpaid internship.
Yeah, and I think before we go further on things, I think it'd be cool if we all kind of talk through like what internships we've had, kind of how we got them, if we had connections or like, you know what I mean, what specific programs or whatever we got them through. I think that'd be interesting. And also, I think a lot of this can be question based. So everyone watching, definitely send in questions if you have them. But so I guess I'll start, and then, you know, Cam, you can go, and then Jill, you can go. So internships that I've had, last summer, I worked at the New York Post, and I actually got that opportunity because a recruiter came to Boston University. So definitely take advantage of connections that your school has, because they might have them, they might have alumni. Don't be afraid to reach out to people and ask them how they got their start at their job. And currently I'm interning at the Miami Herald. I'm in Florida right now. I don't know if anyone has any questions about the process with that, maybe that we can kind of go into more about like how to get to land your internship a little later.
Yeah, so I previously interned at Boston Magazine, was my first, it's a professional internship, and that kind of just led to the Boston Globe, where it was a great place to work. Like I said, at local organizations, it's easier to get your hands in a lot of different places. I got to work on video work and audience engagement, and also they let me like write some things. So I definitely say the name of the publication isn't as important as you might think it is. There's a lot of opportunities at local smaller news organizations, and right now I'm interning at Business Insider.
Yeah, so my first internship was at a local news organization in Hawaii called the Honolulu Civil Beat. It was a policy newspaper, so focus exclusively on like politics and governance and policy. And after that, for the past 8 months, I've been finishing a co-op at the Boston Globe in the magazine, travel, and real estate sections. And just like I was saying before, really each experience led to the next. My clips I got at the Freep directly led to my internship at the Honolulu Civil Beat, and my recommendations from the Honolulu Civil Beat, from the editors at the Civil Beat, as well as my clips there, I can confidently say directly led to my position at the Globe. So really is starting wherever you can and building that experience and building your portfolio and building those recommendations and those connections. It starts small, but then you can work your way up.
And I guess on the topic of how to shine as an intern, it's honestly just like putting in your very best work, being tireless, knowing that you might have to work more than you really are putting in a lot more work than you might actually be getting paid for, even if it's a paid internship. And really just don't be afraid to ask for more work and to propose and pitch ideas. That's like the biggest thing. Sometimes you'll find yourself like not having something to do because editors expect you to pitch. And that's like a whole other thing, learning how to pitch a story. But just really, to be a good intern, it's about doing your work that you're assigned really well, but also volunteering and coming up with ideas, because that gets you noticed and that impresses your boss that you really care about what you're doing.
It's also a little different just with virtual internships now. I think so many people, I mean, I've asked a lot of people how to like network with and be a good intern at a company where I've never been in the office, and I haven't met my coworkers face to face. And the number one thing everyone says is to over communicate. So I think it's really important to get on the same page with your manager, like how they like to be communicated with. I know as an intern, it can seem like, I'm the new person, I don't want to annoy this person or seem overbearing, but just make sure you're on the same page. If you need more tasks to do or have an idea, definitely don't be afraid to say anything.
And one thing I will say is, like Kaylee was saying, always pitch and always put yourself out there. But I would also like to say yes to everything. My stance, my mindset when I head into an internship is it's not as much of a job as it is an opportunity to try new things and experience new things. So even if it does require me to work extra hours, I always try to say yes to everything because everything can lead to another opportunity. And something, it's an open secret that many newspapers are lacking in funds and don't really have the funds to hire, more and more journalists. So really what you are a lot of times is cheap free labor, cheap labor for newspapers. And many editors are swamped and would love to have the help and would love to have you write stories if you just make yourself available. Like a personal anecdote, my current role in the magazine, travel, and real estate sections at the Boston Globe, it's not a article writing position. My main roles include a lot of like copy editing and fact checking, a lot of editorial behind the scenes stuff, but it's not explicitly a writing position. But I have been able to write like over a dozen articles for the travel section, for the magazine, for the real estate section, just because I put myself out there and just because I said yes to everything and made myself available. And my editors were more than happy to oblige me with giving me work because, it's a win-win situation. You get the experience and they get the extra help.
Yeah, and I would say two of my big tips for being an intern is, one, don't be afraid to stick up for yourself. If you helped with an article and you don't notice that you have a byline or even a contributing, don't be afraid to point it out. This happened to me the other day. Literally, it's just a writer forgot to add me on. People will respect you if you stick up for yourself. It's really hard when you're an intern to not feel annoying by asking questions. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to clarify, because everyone's in a rush, especially working virtually. There's just a lack of communication. Don't be afraid to ask questions and to really like stand up for yourself with things, because no one's going to think you're weird or annoying for it. It's all just in your head, or maybe it's in my head, but do that. And also act like you're a real reporter if you're an intern doing reporting work.
Because you are.
Yeah, you are a real reporter, but that's when you're talking to press people, act like you're a reporter. Don't let them treat you like an intern. They're going to want to treat, like, don't put in your email signature that you're an intern. Big tip, don't do that. But sometimes they might find your Twitter and know that you're an intern. And I've had press people treat me not as well because they know I'm an intern and act like I don't know what I'm doing when I'm doing the same thing as any other reporter. Just act like you're a normal reporter. Don't be like, oh, I'm the intern when you're out covering things. You are just a reporter. You're just doing it for a shorter period of time. So that's something I'd say to really make sure you stick up for yourself in that respect.
And something I've been really fortunate to have 2 amazing internships. I've learned so much from the people I've worked with and so much from my editors. And one thing I've noticed is, so a lot of times we enter internships and sometimes we're in awe. Sometimes we are intimidated by the people around us. Sometimes they seem like they're titans of industry, but really, from what I've experienced, is people are actually really nice. They want to help you. They want to help you grow. They want to give you experience. They want to give you advice. A lot of them were interns themselves. I mean, that's how you get the job in journalism, is to be an intern. So most of them were interns themselves, and they know how it feels like to be an intern. They know the process, and they really want to, help you. Just make sure that, like Haley said, you're not intimidated. Make sure you're not too intimidated to ask, because really, as long as you open your mouth and you ask and you put yourself out there, people are more than happy to oblige you. So that's one thing I've noticed is that.
Just going off of that, networking is also super important in connections, just connections in general in the industry. And it's even so much easier, like when you're an intern at a publication, to form a friendship or relationship of some sort with your editor or manager. And when they ask you to do things or when responsibilities start piling up, that can be a sign that people trust you with those roles and with those tasks. And so, I mean, the managers I had at the Globe helped me get my internship now at Business Insider. They helped me prepare for my interview and a lot of times reach out to their connections. And so having those in-house connections is also really good, as well as forming new connections. I think it's good. I always try to network with at least 5 different people outside of my network every month. So that can mean simply just cold emailing reporters, or in my case, I work in audience engagement. So I really reach out to the audience engagement community. The journalism community is really small. And so everyone kind of knows everyone. So a lot of people will answer you and will respond. And to just take like 30 minutes out of their day to have a virtual coffee or to talk on the phone can really help you in the long run. And just keeping those relationships and checking in every few months.
Yeah, I agree with everything Cami had to say, and especially like I've said this, I feel like in everything, but Twitter really is your best friend. Especially, it's a more casual way to make connections with people that you work with. Follow all your coworkers on Twitter, and then when you work on a story with them, tag them and try to get engagement from them, and just use Twitter to your advantage. You're gonna find that you literally have interactions on Twitter with people that you, especially virtually. I literally have never met anyone from my internship, but I have interactions on Twitter with my coworkers about things not even related to the news. They just, because we follow each other, they'll interact with my other tweets, and it's really nice, and it starts connections that they can kind of vouch for you later on, and they're people that just know you in the industry and they might know other people. And so always, whether it be tweeting out your stories so that your news organization retweets it, do what you can when networking to like put yourself, all your work and everything you do out there, and try to connect in every way you can with the people that you work with, even if it's not having a full conversation with them, just having it so that you have a mutual knowledge of each other, because it comes in handy too if you end up working with them at your internship down the road. They already know who you are.
Yeah, and this is more so for in-person internships, which will hopefully be back by next year, crossing fingers. But one big thing to make sure is that, you know, in the newsroom, everybody is spending how many hours of the day there. That's a perfect time, you know, that's a perfect place to get to know the people around you. You know, whether you're sitting next to them, whether they're people in your department, just make time to, you know, talk with them, joke with them, build that relationship with them. Back when the Globe was in person, back in March, back before everything became virtual, I would regularly get lunch with some of my editors, just talking. We wouldn't even talk about work. We just talk about our home. We talk about sports. We talk about politics. We talk about everything. I think that's really important. Is just build a relationship with the people around you, because one, they become connections in the future that you can use to, you know, get other positions. But two, it also really helps them if you're asking them for recommendations. Because if you really get to know your editors, if you really get to know the people above you and the people next to you, that recommendation that they write you will end up being that much more striking, that much more worthwhile. It won't just be the copy and paste. He was a great writer. She was a great reporter. She worked well. It would be more personal, and editors really notice that. I can say that I mentioned this before, but my current editor at the Globe directly referenced my references from my previous internship at the Honolulu Civil Beat. He directly referenced it as one of the reasons why they noticed my application and gave me a second interview. So yeah, I think both online but in person as well. I think building those relationships with the people around you, building that rapport, building those connections is really, really important in journalism, and just in general too. In general, in the job market, I think it's really important.
Yeah, and so I think going into tips on how to land your dream internship, my biggest advice is always apply if you're not sure if you're going to get it. Don't ever feel like, unless it has strict requirements on like the age, like you have to be a certain year, even if you're a little under on other requirements, apply. You never know what's going to happen. They might see your experience and think it's unique and that you might be the right person. Just apply for everything that you can. The journalism industry is extremely competitive. Not only are there very few internships, but there are a lot of students out there. And it's definitely harder than I think a lot of other industries to get internships, but don't let that dissuade, prevent you from applying, because all of us here at the Free have had really great internships and experiences, and there's plenty of us here. We all are able to get it. If you work at your college paper and you do a lot of good work, you're going to get a job. You don't have to worry. But the way to maximize those chances is to apply to as much as you can that you have the time to apply for, and really put work into your applications. The worst thing ever is cover letters, and almost all journalism internships have them. Make sure your cover letter is good. It literally is my least favorite thing ever, but you just have to make sure that your application is the best representation of you, and really just put yourself out there for as many opportunities as you can.
Mm-hmm. I totally second that. It's funny. Haley was talking about some internships have age requirements. For example, the Washington Post is a very strict age requirement. You have to be a junior or senior. I had already started my Washington Post internship application before they literally have like a question where it's like, as of September of this year, what is your standing? And make sure you don't lie, because that's just not, if they find out you're lying, then that's very bad. But other than that, yeah, I definitely second that. It's apply to as many things as you can. I think, if I remember correctly, for this summer and this past semester, I applied to like 9-10 internships and got the one at the Globe. Everything else I was rejected for everything else, but I got one, and that's because I applied to everything I could. So I'd say the same thing to you, is apply to everything you can, and also keep an open mind. Journalism is a pretty wide industry. There are many different branches of it, many different places where you don't really think of, but can give really good experiences. Like, for example, local news organizations. One of the most fulfilling experiences I've had in journalism was working at that local news organization. Because it's smaller, like Cami was saying, you get that much more opportunity to try out things that you want to try out and do, impactful reporting. I remember one specific experience I had. I was reporting on on the Honolulu City Council. They were trying to pass this controversial bill, but it actually gone under the radar. No one was really talking about it. And then I wrote an article on it, and it exploded online, like hundreds of comments on Facebook. The radio was talking about it, and in a week, the city council decided to withdraw the bill from consideration because so many people had called in and talked about it, which made me feel pretty good inside, seeing that the stuff I did actually had impact. So yeah, really consider, there's a wide range of things you can apply for, and really consider them all, because they all can give really cool experiences.
Just on logistics, I know that a lot of internship applications, you submit an application through a portal. And something that I did not know previously was to just don't submit the same resume to like 10 different companies. You should really be tailoring your resume to that certain role you're applying to. A lot of the internships where you're applying through a portal get so many applicants that a human is not screening those applications. It's just going to be a computer that wipes out something that like maybe didn't align with the format of your resume. And so that's my number one tip. Just don't just send out your resume to like 10 different organizations without really tailoring it. Another tip I have is reach out to your connections. Like we were saying before, connections are a huge thing in the journalism industry. I know people who they did not have an internship position for like said role, For example, I have a friend at the New York Times who they created an internship because she knew someone at the Times. And so a lot of the times these connections will help you if, for example, if you lost one due to COVID, reach out to your network. There was another girl at the Las Vegas Review Journal who they created an internship for her because she reached out to her connections. So definitely don't be afraid to start that networking process early rather than later when you're scrambling for a job.
I think
Yeah,
Haley,
networking. Sorry.
go, you go.
Yeah, networking is honestly like how I'm pretty sure almost everyone gets internships, which there's the downside is like you think that you should be just getting your internship for your merits, which is how ideally it should be. But the problem I think is that there's just so many applicants for such few jobs that a lot of news organizations do rely on people that editors know, or just someone at the organization referring you. So whatever you can, just like don't be afraid. There's a lot of people, if someone posts about an internship and they work there, don't be afraid to message them. Doesn't mean they're necessarily going to vouch for you, but they'll at least give you some tips on how to apply that no one else would know because they actually work there. Just don't be afraid to do whatever you can to really maximize your chances at a role.
Yeah, are there any questions? I don't know if anybody's interested about specific positions, specific news organizations that we work with.
Yeah, feel free to ask
And
about anywhere that we've worked before, or how we got there, or what we do, or anything like that. We'll wait a minute or so to see if anyone has any questions.
something I missed earlier, and I wanted to comment earlier, was back when we were talking about unpaid internships. A cool opportunity that BU offers is that BU actually has a program where they give a stipend if you work at a nonprofit organization. My former roommate, Alex, got that organization. I don't know if you want to chime in or talk about it. Your mouth seems full right now.
Sure. It was just one fry. Yeah, so it's the Yawkey nonprofit internship program run through the Yawkey Center. And it's a super, super great opportunity that seems to be relatively like unknown. So that gives you a higher chance of like benefiting from it. I don't know how many of you are BU students, but if you are, then this can be a really good opportunity if you are interested in an internship, but the internship is unpaid, and like that makes it hard because when you're doing an internship, you have less time for your job. So basically, as long as it's a unpaid internship through a nonprofit company, which sometimes journalism internships are, sometimes they aren't. I interned at WGBH this spring, and
which
they
is public
are.
radio.
Yeah, it's a affiliate of NPR in Boston. They also do a lot of television stuff, but they're a nonprofit organization and they weren't paying me, so I was eligible for the stipend, and so you just apply for the stipend. I forget exactly how the process went, but it was a lot of like answering short questions and stuff like that. And not only do you get a stipend through the program, which for me was a $2,000 stipend for the semester, and if it's a summer internship, it's even more than that. You also basically get a mentor in the Yawkey Center that is always a point of contact for you throughout your whole internship to help you with any questions you have and just how to navigate the whole process. So it's a really, really great resource to take advantage of.
And even beyond BU, I'm sure BU is not the only college that has this opportunity. But even beyond colleges, I know there are grants and foundations that give nonprofit interns who volunteer at nonprofits, interns who have unpaid positions. They do give grants to support those interns and the things they do. So always keep an open mind, look online, always try to find those opportunities because they exist. They exist.
Yeah, so I see we got a question that says, is it stressful when you get a byline at a professional publication? To me, it's like the most fun thing ever. I love seeing my byline. It's literally what like makes me happy, seeing my name on a story. Just the only stressful part is if it's like a story that you're worried about, like you don't want to get anything wrong and it's an important story, there is always like a little like anxiety right after it's posted, because you're like, oh no, like is everything okay? And like you read it over a million times and you fact check it a million times. But I wouldn't say it's like stressful to get a byline. I don't know, to me it's like the best part, getting to know that my name is in a professional publication and that my work's out there.
Yeah, it's honestly like, yeah, if the first time or the first few times you work with an editor, I will definitely take extra time to make sure, go through my article like multiple times to make sure everything is correct and as good as it can be. But honestly, to me, it's pretty electrifying. Like, it's like, this is what we sign up to do. This is what we want to do. This is what we're doing is journalism, and impactful journalism too. So yeah, I think really it's like you do so much hard work. So much of journalism is like behind the scenes, like grunt work. Like you do research, you sift through data, you try to contact sources, you get rejected by sources, but it all gets paid off when you see your name in the paper with your byline. And then you clip the paper and you save the piece of the paper and then you put it on the shelf, and then your roommate puts a plant on them and waters a plant, and then the water leaks through and ruins your clips, Alex.
Yeah.
But no, it's fun. It's great. It's great. It's great. And I'm not salty. I'm not salty at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Okay, on that note, I see we have another question that says, what responsibilities do you have in your internship? So I guess we could all kind of go around and talk about that. So right now I'm at the Miami Herald. My general title is a newsroom intern, but my editor is the courts, cops, crime, environment, hurricane, climate change editor. So basically I'm a criminal justice and environment intern. I cover a lot of stuff related to court cases, or I've been doing a lot of police brutality stuff, but also I've just been covering in general a lot of COVID news in Florida. There's plenty. And basically my daily responsibilities, a lot of times I'm just assigned stories that I can do from home, or in the past few days I've been kind of going to some press conferences in person. I covered protests. I've really just done a lot of everything, but my main beat has been criminal justice and kind of COVID news. Just today, one of the counties here opened their school districts for online learning, and so I was covering the schools reopening today. Yeah, just basically doing what a regular reporter in my section would do. That's kind of how my editor treats me. Yeah, it's really fun. Definitely recommend all of you apply to the Miami Herald when you're a little older or upperclassmen. It's a really great internship, and they really give you a lot of great experience and treat you like a regular reporter.
You can go, Joel.
Okay. So back when I was at the Civil Beat, the Honolulu Civil Beat, my job was as a general reporter. I just reported on anything that they needed reporting on, whether it was, and through that, I was able to get a lot of experiences in a lot of different areas. I reported on city council measures. I reported on public schools and the public education system. I reported on environmental issues. So that was my job at my previous internship. My current internship with the Boston Globe is interesting. I'm actually in part of the co-op. I'm actually the co-op for 3 different sections. So I work for the magazine, the travel section, and the real estate section at the Boston Globe. Mainly, I think my position is like the position they made for a whole bunch of the smaller departments that needed a co-op but didn't have the responsibilities to warrant a full job. So they put them all together. So a lot of my job is a lot of editorial process. I do fact checking, I do copy editing, I do data preparation. And then on the side, I do writing. So I've written for the travel section the most, writing travel stories on COVID-19 travel restrictions, reopening policies in different states in the area. I've written for a magazine. I was actually able to do a first-person piece on my life on BU before they kicked everybody off. So like my life on BU when everybody was gone for spring break. But there were like the remaining few people on campus. So I was able to write about my experience there. And yeah, but my position is pretty wide here at the Boston Globe. I do quite a bit of different things.
Yeah, just like Joel, I'm just going to base my responsibilities off at the Globe since I just started my internship at Business Insider, but there were times when I would write a newsletter called the Coronavirus Now, and that would mainly be just tracking all of the data from like all of the states in New England and compiling all the stories revolving around coronavirus. And that was really interesting. There were some times I got to work with the video team and creating Instagram stories or video content for the larger investigation projects we did. It was really cool. I did social media content for an investigation piece that the Globe did about how Massachusetts really failed at handling the coronavirus. And just managing all of the social media accounts. I live tweeted on the Globe's account during the New Hampshire primaries. I was sending like breaking news emails out to 600,000 people. And so it was a variety of things. And don't be afraid if your internship is like a video internship, a reporter's internship, or something with social media to branch out. There were times when I just wanted to talk to these really cool people, like my favorite authors. And when you say you work at the Globe or a publication, they're much more likely to respond to you. So it's a really great opportunity to like do anything that you want to get your hands in.
Yeah, so does anyone have any more questions for us to answer before we finish the section up? If so, it's your last minute to get it in.
Internships are great. Apply for them. They're very needed, and they're amazing experiences.
Yeah. Oh, I see one.
Oh, we got one more.
So are internships flexible with your schedule? Depends when you're doing them. In the summer, I would say no. I mean, your internship's kind of going to be your whole summer unless it's part-time, but typically summer internships really take up your time. For me, there was a little flexibility because I was obviously supposed to come to Miami for the summer. Then the pandemic happened, and so it got pushed up. So I was supposed to start in the beginning of June. But then it got pushed to starting at the end of June because they were like, oh, the pandemic will be better by then. Of course, they didn't know that Florida would be actually getting worse by the end of June. So I literally came down to Florida like in the very worst part of the pandemic, which was awesome. But, you know, that's whatever. But so there was, though, very strict timelines, and I needed to be doing a full 10-week internship. So I'm literally finishing on the 28th, and I have to go to New York and then be back at school by the 1st. So it's kind of a short timeline. So I will say internship managers are pretty specific about the times that they want you to be there. You could always try to work with them. When I worked at the New York Post, I had some commitments at the very beginning, and they helped me work around those. And I was able to like take a week off really early on because it was the schedule I had in advance. And so work with your editors. But in terms of like during the school year, if you want to take on a part-time internship, there are a lot of internships, especially at like local news organizations, that you can do that are part-time and that you can fit around your schedule. And so do those if you can during the school year. But I will say most internships that you're going to do will probably be during the summer, and those tend to be the ones that are really full-time and take up all your time.
And I'd also say, you know, depends on what role you'll be going into. If it's going to be as a full-time internship, a full-time reporter, then it's a job. You know, that is your job. So they expect you to make it a priority, make it your first priority. If it's a part-time internship that you do during the school year, like Haley said, they know that they have to be flexible on that. You know, I doubt that there will be any part-time internship that requires you to change your classes or requires you to not do your homework to do the internship. Like they know that you're a student. But in terms of full-time internships, they don't expect you to take classes during your full-time internship. And I'd say, you know, pretty much you'd have to make the internship your priority during that time. Not to say that there aren't going to be some flexibility. Like one time, like in my past internship last summer, I had a pre-planned trip in the middle of the internship in the middle of the internship time span that I was able to wiggle in, and then they extended my internship another 2 weeks after that to make up for the time that I missed. But that just requires you to ask, and if they say no, they say no.
So I see, okay, I mean, if you want to answer the rest of that, go ahead.
I was just going to go off what Jill said. Usually it is more flexible in the fall and during the school year because they know that you're a student, and they're probably used to dealing with class schedules changing a lot. When I was at Boston Magazine, I had to redo my internship schedule a couple of times just because I was constantly switching my class schedule the first 2 weeks of school. And just be open about burnout if you're getting tired or anything. I know at my current internship, they do paid time off, and definitely just be open and honest. I mean, and be like conscious about the time too. Like with the November election, probably no one is going to be getting time off, and everyone's going to have to be available at all hours of the night. So just make sure to read the situation.
Yeah. So our next question is, can you get an internship during sophomore year, or is it better to wait until junior, senior year? Don't wait at all. Like, try to get experience, honestly, as quickly as you can. I had, like, my first internship summer after freshman year for, like, an online news site that I don't really even put on my resume anymore. But I worked for the New York Post summer after sophomore year. Just apply to what you can. If there are internships that are open to the students that aren't juniors or seniors. And it's crazy because those ones that are specifically for juniors or seniors always ask you to have at least like one or two other experiences at newspapers, and sometimes you need more than just a college paper, which is really dumb because the whole point of internships is to learn. But yeah, get as many as you can early on. That's the best advice I could give. If you put yourself out there, you might just be able to get things when you're younger than a junior or senior. I know most people kind of that I know in journalism have done stuff before summer after their junior year. I'd say they've done it like summer after their sophomore year, or even some after their freshman year have had really cool internships. So yeah, don't be afraid to really start looking early, because that experience is important, and it's also just fun to have a job early on in the field that you like instead of just another random summer job.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like I'd almost go to say that it's, it's required or it's necessary to get an internship as early as you can, just to make sure that you are as attractive as you can be as a candidate. I think my first internship was the summer of my freshman year, was a civil beat, and then this past semester, the second semester of sophomore year, I took the semester off to work at the Globe. And I think, it's very important to try to get opportunities as early as you can, because they build on each other. And by your following junior and senior year of college, your previous experience at your internship at the college newspaper will help you get even more positions. But that all builds upon your previous experiences and the previous connections that you've made. But yeah, good question.
Yeah, just going off of that, like I said previously, don't be afraid to reach out to connections, especially your local papers. Like, they might not advertise an internship, but it doesn't hurt to directly reach out to whatever section you want to work under and just ask them if you have any opportunities. And sometimes you might even have to offer to do it for free or unpaid. But a lot of people won't advertise internships, but they still have opportunities. There's a girl, a sophomore at Northwestern, who recently got published in Vox, and I think is doing reporting for the New York Times this coming year. So it's definitely not limited by age.
Yeah, I think that's all the questions that we got for this section. But if you have any questions on any of the sections before we wrap up the whole event, please feel free to send them in. Any of us can answer them. We just want to make sure we get those before we finish up for the night.
Okay, I think that's it. Thanks so much for listening to my TED Talk.
I think before we finish up for the whole night, all of us panelists should drop our emails and Twitters in case you need to contact us for your assignment kind of thing that we're doing, or just any questions. I want to make sure that you guys can all reach out to us. So everyone in the panelists should send that out so people can reach out to us if you ever need a connection or anything like that. All right, so Angela, I don't know if you want to do a little last minute wrap up, but. Oh, I think you're muted, Angela.
Oops. No, yeah, I just think this is a great session. Thank you to everyone for coming to our last one. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us if you ever want to talk about anything or make a connection or ask questions, anything like that. So yeah, I think
we just got another question about the assignment, if they'll get a response if we choose to publish their article in the brief.
Yeah. If we do, so you're gonna receive feedback and like suggestion edits for your article. And if we do choose to publish it, we'll of course let you know. All right. I think we can end it here.
Hey, well, thanks so much. See everybody later. Hopefully I see all of you on campus if you're a BU student or on Zoom.
Yeah, thank you to everyone who showed up to all these days. We appreciate it, and hope you got something out of it. And follow the Daily Free Press on all social media. They're doing really good stuff.